On a flat rooftop terrace near the date palm gardens, in the great oasis city that its own people called Tadmor, and that the wider world knew as Palmyra, a woven rug still held a ghost of the sun's warmth. The fierce heat of the summer day had long since drained out of the stone and the sand, and the air that moved over the rooftops now was cool and clean, carrying the faint sweetness of water and earth and far-off dust. A traveller who had come in with the caravan at dusk lay there beneath a warm woolen cloak, still at last, simply resting, simply breathing, letting the night hold him. Above the terrace the sky was vast and deep black, salted with the first brilliant stars. Somewhere below, in a courtyard by the spring, the last camels grunted softly and settled their long necks in the straw. The first raised columns of the city's main avenue glimmered faintly in the starlight, a line of standing stone as gentle as a lowered eyelid. All around, the sound of Palmyra was the sound of a whole world letting go of its waking, a murmur of water in the channels, a distant creak of a closing door, the last low voices of the caravanserai fading into the dark. The dust of the road lay quiet on the rug, and on the cloak, and on the sleeping courtyards, and nothing anywhere in the city was in any hurry to move. Deep at the heart of the oasis, the spring of Efqa rose warm out of the limestone earth. A sacred spring that had welled up there since before memory, a steady, unending gift of clear, warm water, mineral-rich and faintly touched with the smell of the deep rock it came from. It poured into stone-lined channels that carried its life out into walled gardens, into long groves of date palms and olive trees and pomegranates, into small courtyards where women had watered the herbs and the flowers since morning. All day the water ran and sang, and now in the dark it could still be heard by anyone quiet enough to listen. A soft, liquid whisper threading through the city like a pulse. The palms stood tall and dark against the stars, their fronds barely stirring in the night breeze, and the green of their leaves was a miracle set in a sea of sand. Beyond the last garden wall, the desert began, a wide, silent ocean of pale gold that stretched away to every horizon. But inside the oasis, the water held the desert back, and the air smelled of wet stone and growing things and the deep, earthy sweetness of dates ripening in the dark. It was this one spring, this single patient gift of water in the waterless waste, that had raised a whole city of pale golden stone in the middle of the sand. The long, straight street ran through the heart of the sleeping city, and nothing moved along it. On either side rose tall, pale limestone columns, newly cut and still fresh, their capitals carved with leaves and scrolls that were now only deep shadow. The first proud beginnings of the grand colonnade the city was slowly raising along its central way. Here and there in the open squares stood honorific statues of the great caravan leaders, the men who had brought their trains safely home across the trackless sands. Their names were cut into the stone beneath them in the curling letters of Palmyrene and the clear, even shapes of Greek, two tongues sharing a single city. At the great crossroads, where the ways met open to the sky, the wide paving lay empty and quiet, reflecting only the stars. Off to one side, the great theatre sat dark and still, its curved tiers of stone steps rising in silent ranks, holding nothing that night but shadow and hush. The flat-roofed houses huddled close together under the dark, their families asleep on mats and rugs, their courtyards quiet, their oil lamps long since blown out. A faint, dry breath of wind moved down the line of columns, brushing between them with a sound softer than a whisper, and then it was gone. No cart rattled, no merchant called, no footstep echoed on the paving stones. The whole city breathed slowly, deeply, trusting the dark. At dusk, the caravan had come in out of the desert road. A long, slow, swaying line of dromedaries, their single humps silhouetted against the orange and rose of the sunset, their soft bronze bells ringing with a dull, patient rhythm. For days they had walked across the trackless waste, and the men had walked beside them, and the dust of the journey was still in the folds of every tunic, still fine upon every arm and cheek. As the last light faded, the drivers couched the camels in the wide courtyard of the caravanserai, speaking to them in low, rough voices, and the beasts folded their long legs and sank to the ground with deep, sighing groans. The packs and bales were lifted down, bundles of raw silk from the far side of the earth, sacks of pepper and cinnamon, small heavy boxes of pearls and gemstones, lumps of frankincense and myrrh wrapped in cloth, glass vessels packed in straw, rolls of coloured dyes. The traders, dusty and tired, drank their fill of cool water from the courtyard jars and broke flat bread and ate dates and salted cheese, wine mixed with water in their cups, speaking softly in many tongues. Now the bales were stacked in shadow, the courtyard was still, and the long desert road behind them lay empty and dark and harmless, a path already becoming memory. The dromedaries rested in the cool of the courtyard, their great bodies couched on the swept earth, their long curved necks swaying gently as they chewed their cud with a rhythmic, grinding calm. Their soft grunts and deep rumbling breaths rose and fell, a low animal music that blended with the sound of the spring water. One of them shifted, and the bell on its halter gave a single dull chime, and then was silent again. The camel drivers lay among them, wrapped in their own cloaks, their heads pillowed on saddles or packs, sleeping with the easy trust of men who had reached safe harbour. These beasts were the true ships of the desert. They could cross days of waterless sand without drinking, their broad, padded feet spreading softly on the dunes where a horse would stumble and sink, their long-lashed eyes closing against the blowing sand. Now those eyes were shut in rest, and their breath steamed faintly in the cool night air, and they were as still as the carved beasts on a temple frieze. There was an old and wordless bond between these men and their animals, a trust worn smooth over countless miles. And that night the caravan slept, animal and human together, in the deep contentment of a journey completed, a road brought at last to its peaceful end. In the great, sacred precinct of the Temple of Bel, the vast courtyard lay open to the stars. The high walls enclosed a space of profound quiet, a rectangle of stone and sky where the supreme god of Palmyra was worshipped, together with his two holy companions, Yahibol the sun and Aglibol the moon. By day, The sun poured down on the altar and the white limestone blazed. But now the altar was cool, and the last curl of incense had risen from its coals and dissolved into the dark, leaving only a faint, sweet resin on the air. Inside the cellar, in the innermost chamber, a single oil lamp burned before the cult image, its small flame steady and golden, tended through the night by quiet priests who moved without sound. Bel was the Lord of the heavens, the one who set the stars in their order and who watched over the great rhythms of time. Yahibol was the sun who would return with the dawn, and Aglibol was the moon, whose silver crescent was turned away and hidden that night, so that the whole starry sky itself became his dark and glittering canopy. The temple stood serene, untroubled, a still heart at the center of the city, and the gods needed nothing more from the world that night than that single small flame and the silence that surrounded it. Beyond the last garden wall, beyond the last sleeping house, the desert opened under a sky so clear and so deep that it seemed a man might step up into it. The heat of the day had fled entirely. The sand was cool now as old stone, and the air was so dry and pure that every star burned with a hard, bright, steady flame, undimmed by any smoke or haze of men. The Milky Way arched across the very top of the sky like a broad river of pale light, so thick and brilliant that it seemed almost to hum with its own silent music, spilling from one dark horizon to the other. The horizon itself was a perfect, unbroken ring, the faint line where sand met sky. And there was no lamp, no fire, no human mark anywhere out there. Only the immense quiet of the waste, a silence so deep that a single soft breath sounded like the only sound in the world. No wind stirred the dunes, no jackal cried. The desert that night was not a place of thirst or fear. It was a gentle, sleeping giant, stretched out beneath the stars, its harshness laid down and set aside, its long miles of sand cupping the oasis the way a shell cradles a single pearl. Low in the western sky, just above the dark rim of the desert, a single star burned with a steady white flame. The evening star, the first to appear after sunset, the herald of the night. In the old faith of this city, that star was one of the holy twins, the brothers Arsu and Azizu, the protector gods of caravans and of all who traveled the desert roads. They were seen as riders and as guardians, two gentle fires that watched over the tracks and the wells and the lonely paths across the sand. The evening star was one twin, keeping his patient vigil as the city fell asleep. And before dawn, his brother would rise as the morning star to light the other edge of the sky and promise a safe new day. In the old carvings of this city, the two brothers ride together, one upon a swift horse and one upon a tall desert camel, their spears at rest, forever guarding the traveler on the long road home. The camel drivers had offered them a quiet word before they lay down, a simple whisper of thanks for safe passage. And now the twin who was awake stood his watch in the west, his light a calm, unwavering promise that the road was held in friendly hands. From the rooftop, he showed as a point of silver white that seemed almost to breathe with the slow rhythm of the night itself. And there was no loneliness in all that dark, only a watchful kindness that never closed its eyes. there were other gods woven into the fabric of this oasis, as present in the night as the scent of water. High above them all was Baalshamin, the lord of the heavens, whose rain falls in the winter to soak the limestone hills and feed the deep springs, the one who sends the fertile season when the palms put out their new fronds and the pomegranates swell and blush. And beside the sacred garden walked Malakbel, the messenger of Bel, bound up with the sun and with the green growth of the oasis, the god who coaxes the sweet dates from the heavy branches and turns the small hard olives into rich golden oil, who keeps the springs flowing and the soil dark and giving against the drying heat of the day. Their sanctuaries stood somewhere among the sleeping streets, small courtyards or larger precincts where their images waited in the dark, and the last offerings of the evening lay where they had been set down. A few dates upon an altar, a splash of wine mixed with water poured out upon the ground. That night, the gods were not distant powers. They were as close as the cool air on a sleeper's face, as the sweetness of the fruit eaten at sunset, as the quiet certainty that the spring would still be flowing when the city opened its eyes at dawn. In the caravanserai, the bales and bundles rested in the quiet, and the whole width of the known world was folded inside them. Raw silk from the far-off land of China, where the thread was unwound from cocoons by people who would never see the sea. That silk would travel on to the workshops of the Roman world. And one day a senator's wife in Rome would wear a gown of it, never knowing that it began its journey on the other side of the earth. Pepper and cinnamon and fine spices from India, pearls from the warm waters of the Persian Gulf, frankincense and myrrh tapped from the trees of southern Arabia. All of it had crossed deserts and mountains and rivers to lie there that night, in that one courtyard, in that one city of palms. And a slow tide moved the other way as well. Glass from the workshops of Syria, dyes of deep-sea purple, fine woven cloth moving east while the silk moved west. A patient exchange that had flowed for centuries. All of it passed through Palmyra, through that sleeping courtyard, carried on the backs of the camels who now rested so still, as though the whole great breathing body of the world's commerce had paused for a single night to draw a slow, quiet breath. The men who had guarded the caravan slept now, their watch done. These were the famous Palmyrene riders and archers, men who could sit a swaying dromedary or a swift desert horse and loose an arrow from the saddle, their cloaks the color of dust, their bows unstrung and laid quietly beside them. They had brought the caravan safe across the sand, and now they lay among the other travelers, their faces smoothed and peaceful in the dark. The great caravan leader, the synodiarch who had planned the journey, who knew the wells and the grazing, who paid the guards and read the stars for the way. He too was asleep, and one day his statue would stand honored by the city he had made rich. In the long shaded arcades, the murmur of many tongues had faded into silence. The soft music of Palmyrene Aramaic, the clear, even syllables of Greek, the rolling cadence of Latin, and the tongues of Arabia and Parthia beyond. In the daylight, they were strangers from 100 lands, bargaining and trading. But there, in the deep, unifying quiet of the desert night, they were simply fellow travelers, bound together by a shared road and a shared need for rest. A small, floating world of strangers sleeping side by side, tucked safely between the deep desert and the road that led onward. The people of this city believed that their home was watched over by a special guardian, the Gad, the Fortune, the Tyche of Palmyra. She is a veiled goddess, often shown wearing a crown shaped like the walls of the city, and she holds the luck of the oasis in her calm and open hands. The Gad of the spring watches too, a gentler spirit of the flowing water. And in every home, in every small courtyard and shadowed doorway, the household gods stood in their niches. Little figures of clay or stone, the guardians of the hearth and the storeroom, honored with a pinch of salt or a drop of oil. A faint wisp of sweet smoke still drifted up from one such small shrine, a last quiet offering rising into the cool air. That night, the whole warm, dark oasis lay softly cupped in this web of friendly, protecting powers. They could not be seen, but they could be sensed in the way the night held its peace, in the way the stars seemed to lean a little closer, in the quiet certainty that no harm would come. The veiled goddess does not sleep, and her long vigil lay like a blessing over every rooftop and every sleeper. And under everything, quieter than all of it, ran the living water. The spring of Efqa welled up in its sacred pool, a warm, clear upwelling that never stopped, day or night, summer or winter. It rose from deep in the limestone, carrying the memory of ancient rain, and it spilled into the stone channels that ran out through the gardens, through the groves of date palms and olives, past the courtyards, where clay jars stood filled for the morning. It could be heard by anyone whose breathing had settled, a soft, endless, liquid note, a low gurgle over worn stone, a sound that was the very voice of the oasis. The palm fronds stirred faintly in the night breeze, a dry, papery whisper that answered the water's song, and somewhere out among the pools, a frog called once, and then fell silent. The whole green miracle of Palmyra rested upon this one spring, this one gift in the waterless waste. And now, in the dark, it felt like a promise kept, a kindness renewed with every slow heartbeat of the earth. The sound of it washed over the rooftops, cool and sweet, and thoughts loosened under it and drifted like leaves upon a slow and gentle current. Above the sleeping city, on the low ridge of the western hills, the tall, square tower tombs of the great Palmyrene families stood dark against the crowded stars. They were built of the same pale limestone as the city, rising several stories into the night, and within their cool stone chambers they held the generations of Tadmor, the honored dead lying on carved shelves, each sealed behind a sculpted portrait of the one who rested there. Veiled women, heavy with carved jewels, and turbaned elders in their finest robes. A child, a merchant, a mother with her hand raised gently to her cheek. All of them worked with careful and loving hands, their calm stone eyes open upon a long, peaceful sleep that had lasted for lifetimes. The ancestors did not wander or trouble the living. They rested in their high towers, keeping their own quiet vigil over the oasis they had loved and built. The constellations wheeled overhead with a slow, even motion, too gentle to see and somehow easy to feel, like the breathing of the sky. The two bears, the great one and the little one, turned about the still dark pivot of the north, and all the other stars followed their ancient tracks. The night sky and the tower tombs were part of one great stillness, one patient order that Bel set in place at the beginning of things, and there was no restlessness anywhere in it, only a deep, calm continuity holding the living and the dead and the gods gently together. On the rooftop, the traveller's breathing had grown slow and heavy. The woolen cloak was warm around his shoulders, and the woven rug beneath him felt as safe as a small boat tied to a quiet shore. The sounds of the city had softened to a distant, hushed pulse. The last low grunt of a camel, the whisper of the spring, the faintest rustle of a palm frond stirring and then going still. The twin star of the evening kept its steady watch low in the west, a single point of silver light that seemed to blink in time with a slowing heartbeat. The lamp in the Temple of Bel still burned, a tiny golden seed of flame, and the great gods of the oasis, Bel and Yahibol and Aglibol, Baal-Shamin and Malak-Bel, and the veiled Gad who never sleeps, kept their quiet vigil through the night, asking nothing, expecting nothing, simply present. The desert held the city the way a hand holds a small, warm pearl, and there was no world beyond that moment, no road left to travel, no dawn that anyone had to rise and meet. The stars blurred and softened, the water murmured, the camels slept. And the traveller let go at last, drifting gently over the edge of waking into a sleep as deep and still and kind as the desert night itself.